Hello everyone, DM Gashbad here. Voice is off, timing's off, but the games are on. Wanted to get this one last battle report in before the end of the year, because at the beginning I made myself a bit of a New Year's resolution. Like the year before, I wanted to bring 3 new games to the channel in 2023. I've already done 2. I've done Zombicide Black Plague and the Ghostbusters board game, and so now we're bringing you Marvel Zombies. Marvel Zombies is another Zombicide game by Cool Mini or Not. I did the full backing on Kickstarter primarily because the models were almost the same scale as the Marvel Universe miniature game, and I really wanted to expand my collection with some of these guys. But of course I like the Zombicide game anyway, so I wanted to give it a try. So I picked up the Marvel Zombies game where you play as the zombies and try to eat shield agents, the Marvel Zombies X-Men Resistance where you are good guys fighting various infected superheroes and superhero types. Then I separately bought the Marvel Zombies Heroes Resistance, which is a smaller packaged game where you are heroes fighting Marvel zombies, as well as some card counters of regular zombies. And I also found at the swap meet for a really low price the first edition of the original Zombicide. So I actually went and played the tutorial mission of all 4 of these games. And then I went through and found out how many models I used in each of them. And the one with the smallest model count that I had to paint, well, I went later in and painted those up, got some new pictures, and that's what I'm presenting you here today. The first, shortest, lowest model count tutorial mission from Marvel Zombies X-Men Resistance. Now, there's no real campaign system in the Zombicide games, but since I'm playing all 4 of these games concurrently, I'm kind of adapting it into a sort of ongoing narrative. After all, I'm using a bunch of the same models for all 4 games. So here are the rules that I set for myself while I'm doing these battle reports. Number 1, I'm going to be using a lot of non-standard models. Primarily that means for the living superheroes, I'm going to be using a lot of Knight Models Marvel Universe miniature game models. I'm a slow painter, I don't want to repaint these guys. But there's some other things that are going to come up where I'm swapping out various models, but I think it's going to be pretty clear to everyone who's watching what's what. Number 2, if I choose or encounter a living or zombie hero, their living or zombie alternate will be unavailable in the campaign. So if I choose to play as Zombie Hulk, Living Hulk is unavailable. If I run into Living Iron Man as an enemy, then Zombie Iron Man is going to be taken out of the decks that I use. Characters generally aren't going to swap between zombie and living selves. Number 3, when I choose a living hero as a player character in one of the games, I'm going to remove that enemy from the zombie versions of the game. If I'm playing as a character in the living version, then I don't want my zombie heroes eating him in the games that they play. I want them to die because of their dumb mistakes, not because of the game's AI's mistakes. The same doesn't apply to the zombie heroes. I figure that zombie heroes can lose their minds, from hunger and act stupidly, and they might get destroyed in a game, but they're zombies. They can show up again, including the games where I'm playing them. Number 4, if a zombie or living hero is killed while it's being used as a player character, then it will no longer be available for the rest of the campaign. I done made a mistake, they're dead. There's a small caveat in that if I'm playing a living hero and it gets killed while I'm playing the game, then it can come back as either a playable character or an enemy NPC as the zombie version. Number 5, if living heroes or zombie heroes are defeated while they're being used as enemies in other games, then they can still come back. The exception is that if a living hero is devoured in a game where I'm playing as the zombies, then no, that's pretty terminal. They're dead, and their zombie alternate, if they have one, can start showing up. Number 6, same with the bystanders. If a bystander is devoured, it's out of the game. It can be saved numerous times. It's not so hard saving a bystander, but keeping them saved, that's the tricky part. And finally, number 7, the decks of enemy superheroes and bystanders need to have at least 50% of the cards representing models that we haven't seen before. I don't want to keep fighting the same characters over and over again. It'll also keep me painting new stuff. So with all that sorted out, let's go and look at my team for the first game. Because I'm playing solo, I'm going to use 4 models. And because we're playing Marvel Zombies X-Men Resistance, and X-Men was always my favorite comic, we're going to make a team of X-Men. And of course, first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to choose my favorite character from the books, which is Cyclops. I know half of you are complaining, but here's the deal. There are 2 kinds of X-Men fans. One where Cyclops is their favorite character, and the other where he's their least favorite character. What can I say? He's my favorite character. I'm not going to bother explaining it, but he is. His basic attack, of course, is Optic Blast, range 1, 2 dice that hit on a 3+. The blue ability that he starts with allows him to spend 1 power and add 1 to that range and ignore target priority. So for the rest of the team, I was strongly tempted to set up some of the original X-Men of Beast, Iceman, and Jean Grey, but the version of Jean Grey in this game is Dark Phoenix, which is a little weird, and I'd have to paint up a bunch of those models. So instead, I went with a series of the newer team, or at least, from my perspective, it was formed decades ago. We got ourselves Wolverine, Colossus, and Rogue. I was thinking about swapping out Nightcrawler for Rogue, but they put Rogue in the core set. I'm going to use her. Rogue has a basic melee attack, which is range 0, of course, 2 dice hitting on 3+. Her blue ability is that all enemies in her zone are -1 toughness, and once per turn she can open a door for free, which is kind of cool. Colossus is another melee brawler, 2 attacks, 3+, and he is tough as steel. Once during each enemy phase, he can ignore a wound. And finally, there's Wolverine. Again, melee. This time he throws 3 dice hitting on 4+. He also has Berserker Rage. He's +1 to hit for each wound that he suffered, and any roll of a 6 generates another attack die. So that's the team. As I said, I'm using Knight Model's old Marvel Universe miniatures game. In fact, although I wasn't thinking about it at the time, this is the starter box for the X-Men set. So someone must have thought this was a good starting crew. So here we are all set up for MH0 tutorial Flight of the X-Jet. My people start in the bottom center zone. The exit is in the top right, but in order to get to it, we have to get through that green door, and the key to the green door is the objective in the lower left. The objective gives 5 XP to the character who picks it up. There's only 1 active spawn zone on the board when we begin, and we're standing on it, so that's going to encourage us to get moving. There's another spawn zone right ahead. That's going to activate when we get that green objective. So that's it. Small board, few spawn zones. This should be a quick game. So to start us off, we're going to start with Rogue. Rogue increases her power by 1. She moves 1 zone up ahead and then uses her ability to open the door to the left for free. When we open a zone, we spawn all the bystanders and enemies in there. So there's 4 zones in the room that we're opening up. 2 of them have spaces for enemies, and 1 of them has a space for the bystander. We draw a spawn card for the zone right in front of Rogue, and we get Brute Overdrive. If there were any brutes on the board, they would immediately move 2 zones and drain away all the power of any enemy heroes that end up in their zone. But guess what? There are no brutes on the board, so we don't have to worry about that. The second enemy spawn gives us Hidden Bystander. This turned out to be a pretty lucky spawn. So first thing we do is we draw a bystander and we get Abigail Brandt. I know Abigail Brandt. I read Astonishing X-Men. Cool, Director of Sword in our house. Anyway, she's hiding in the wreckage here from the next spawn card that I draw, and we get a zombie hero. I should mention at this point that I'm using for bystanders and zombie heroes a mix of the cards between the X-Men set and the core box. So when we draw a zombie hero, we get Zombie Deadpool from the core box. Makes sense, that guy's always hanging around the X-Mansion. So yeah, Abigail, makes sense you'd want to hide from him. And finally in the lower left we draw another bystander, we get Amanda Sefton. A little bit obscure, I had to look her up, although I think she has been in some comics that I own. Girlfriend of Nightcrawler, sorceress. Cool model, happy to have her. Hey, speaking of the models, for these combat bystanders, I have rebased them. They normally come on these really tiny bases so you can fit more models on the game zones, but I cut them off of those and put them on the standard Knight Models bases, just in case one day I want to make up stats for them and use them in the Marvel Universe miniature game. I didn't bother doing that for Zombie Deadpool, he can stand on his giant stack of money. But it's still Rogue's turn, she's only used 1 action. Although I think I make a mistake with that. I think I thought she used 2 actions, because I move her once more and then end my turn. I should have powered up or something. I want to advance her 1 zone because I want to get close enough to Deadpool to do something about him. If I stand back, he's just going to move into Amanda's zone and kill her probably. I don't want that to happen, but I got a little bit of a plan. That plan involves Colossus. He's going to move 2 zones into Rogue space, and he's going to draw a heroic trait. He draws Power Up, which means that he can discard the card and do a free power-up action. That's fine. I'm going to try and draw Deadpool into my zone. Since we're equidistant between us and a bystander, I get to choose which way the zombie heroes go. We're going to taunt Wade until he comes after us, and then he'll, since zombie heroes get 2 actions in their go, he's going to move for 1 action, attack for another action, but Colossus can ignore 1 wound around, so I shouldn't get hurt. Cyclops and Wolverine both advance 3 zones to the top left. We're going to try and get to Amanda and that objective. So end of the hero's turn, now it's time for the zombies. Sure enough, Wade comes charging in, slashing at Colossus, but we saw the first Deadpool movie. We know this doesn't go real well. Colossus is fine. Then the bystanders move. Bystanders move towards the closest hero. So Amanda Sefton goes into Wolverine and Cyclops' zone, and Abigail moves into Rogue and Colossus' zone. Normally, Brant wouldn't move into a zone with a zombie. However, she's hidden right now, which means that the zombies ignore her and she ignores the zombies. So as far as I can tell, she doesn't have a problem with it. After her turn, she does have to roll a d6, and on a 5+, she loses her hidden status, but she doesn't. She's doing pretty good being sneaky. Then we go on to the spawn enemy step. There's only 1 active spawn point. We're in the blue, we draw a card, and we get 2 walkers. You will notice that I'm using standard zombies from the Zombicide first edition game for these guys, not the multiple man zombies. The reason for this generally is because I want my X-Men to be fighting normal zombies. I want this to be a worldwide catastrophe, not something that's affecting just a cluster of superheroes and paramilitary organizations. I want to fight regular zombies. Also, if I paint up these guys, then I can use them in Zombicide First Edition, Marvel Zombies Heroes Resistance, and any other game I feel like County Road Z or something, which I would like to try and play at some point. But it's turn 2 and it's back to the heroes. And I'm going to start with Rogue again, because we have a Wade Wilson-sized problem on our hands. And I think Rogue is the person to deal with this. Her first action is going to be to power up, which puts her at 4 power with the one that she gets at the beginning of the round. Then we're going to attack Wade with Mighty Punches, and because we're Rogue and we are so mighty, his toughness goes down from 4 to 3. Rogue is throwing 6 dice, which hit on 3 pluses, and she gets 5 hits, which cleanly knocks Zombie Deadpool's head right off his shoulders. Good job, Rogue. She gets 4 XP. Unfortunately, then I go and double check Zombie Deadpool's special ability. When Zombie Deadpool is killed, you don't remove him from the table. Instead, you just lay him down in the zone where he was dispatched. From then on, any superhero entering his zone has to roll a d6. On a 5+, they take a wound. And that's super inconvenient because Wolverine and Cyclops are stuck in that room. They're going to have to go past headless Zombie Deadpool. Not really anything I can do about it though, so Rogue just leaves, her job having been done. Now, she does move out back into the hall, into the zone, with that inactive spawn point, which I intend to activate this round. Normally it's a terrible idea to stand on a spawn point in these games, but I intend for Colossus to join her, so that's going to be a pretty solid wall of muscle that those zombies are going to have a hard time breaking through. And of course, you only have to roll for Zombie Deadpool when you enter the zone, not when you leave it, so she doesn't get stabbed on her way out. Colossus is up next. He's going to rescue Abigail Brand, so his power goes up to full and her card goes on his dashboard. Normally you remove the bystander model from the game when they get rescued, but I'm leaving her there because, I want to show that Colossus is protecting her and dragging her around, and also because Colossus is then going to move back into the hall, and I'm immediately going to use Abigail's special power. Once during Colossus' turn, he can spend 1 power, and he's got lots of it right now, to get Brand to take out her space laser and zap 1 walker or runner within range 1. So we're going to zap one of those walkers in the south, and Colossus is going to get an XP. Colossus has an action left, but he doesn't want to move on that zone with the spawn point and the zombie. He's got all the power and heroic traits he could want, so he's just going to chill there. There is still a zombie in the south that I really don't want to deal with, so I'm going to move Cyclops back 2 zones into the hallway to join Colossus and Rogue. He's going to take the optic blast and vaporize the zombie's head, getting him an XP. Unfortunately, because he had to enter Wade's zone, he has to roll a d6, and he rolls a 5+. So as he's running past Deadpool's headless corpse, it suddenly springs up and stabs him. Cyclops probably shoots a big hole through him again. He falls down, but you never know. Really should find that head. That leaves Wolverine to clean up everything in this room. The first thing he's going to do is rescue Amanda Sefton. He's then going to move 1 zone to the south and pick up the green objective. Now we can open the door to the right, and also the zombie spawn that we're standing on becomes active. So over to the zombie turn, there's no zombies on the board to move, so we go straight to spawning. In the south, we end up with 1 runner, and then in the north, we get multiple man multiplication. Normally that would produce an extra walker on all the zones with walkers, but there are none on the board, so we're getting off pretty light here. Can't stop the X-Men. Round 3, and Rogue is first up in the batting order again. The green door is now open, so Rogue's going to use her free action to kick it in. Again, we have 2 enemy zones and a bystander in this room. The first one gives us extra runner activation. Normally that would be a big problem. All the runners on the table would suddenly get a whole extra activation. Of course, they get 2 actions per activation, which would bring them into contact with us, and they would start chewing on our guys. Colossus couldn't even block that because he can only block attacks made in the enemy phase. But it doesn't matter because you can't activate that ability when you're in the blue experience level. So again, pretty lucky draw. The second enemy spawn is a single brute rush. So a single brute goes into the lower right and then activates. He's going to try and get to all my guys, but both routes are just as far, so I get to choose which way he goes. I send him to the north because I don't want him in the same zone as the bystander. The bystanders spawn after the enemies, so this is all legitimate if it went the other way around, and he absolutely would have gone towards the bystander. But now it's time to draw and find out who that is, and it's Shauna. Shauna the She-Devil. Again, kind of obscure. Jungle Avenger / veterinarian / buddy of Kazar. I don't know, she sounds cool. She goes on the big base. Again, opening that door was a free action, but I think I just forget this, and I think Rogue only has 2. And so she moves into the room, doesn't want to go and tangle with the brute without any actions to spend to attack, so she just powers up to 3. If I had remembered that she has her full 3 actions, I would have sent her down to rescue Shauna. I'm going to activate Colossus next. Colossus is at full power now, so he spends 1 of it to, again, have Abigail peek out from behind his shoulder and zap that runner to the south. 1 more XP, nicely taken care of. Brant is a cool card. I like having her and Colossus be a team. The big metal behemoth then moves 2 zones over to the upper right to that zone with the brute in it. And YB Stingy spends an attack action and all of his remaining power, so plus 3 dice, 5 dice hitting on 3+. Now, brutes do need 2 hits to be eliminated, but Colossus has no problem doing that, turning this guy into a big squishy mess. Another XP for Colossus, and again you'll notice I'm using the brutes from the Zombicide game, not the Reavers from the X-Men Resistance game. The reasons are the same as before, except I really have a problem with the Reavers being the brutes in this game. There's really only one Reaver with the tank tread lower half of his body, at least as far as I'm concerned, and that's Bonebreaker. The rest of the Reavers are just kind of normal guys. And there's not really a whole lot of them, I don't know. Eventually I'll paint up some multiple men zombies and like 1 Reaver brute, give him the white mohawk and everything and the Bonebreaker tattoo, but for right now I'd rather use the regular guys. The Hellfire Soldiers, okay, those kind of make sense. Those would make decent runners. But again, I'm using the runners in the Heroes Resistance game and the Zombicide First Edition game, so I'm using the standard runners, which are kind of hilarious that they're all like in actual track suits with running gear and everything. Cyclops is up next. He's got 3 actions. He could go and rescue Shauna, but Shauna's special ability only affects melee attacks, and Scott is a ranged character, so it wouldn't do him any good. So instead, he's just going to move 1 zone into the room and then draw a heroic trait. And he gets Ambush, which means that a zombie is immediately placed in that zone. He does get to draw another heroic trait though and gets Resourceful. I can discard it to give him +1 range just in case he wants to shoot his optic beam across the city. But of course I did leave myself an extra action, so he goes and does an optic blast in his own zone, eliminates the zombie. You can't sneak up on Scott Summers like that. Another XP, and that's why you don't draw a heroic trait as your last action. Finally, we're over to Wolverine, and Wolverine has some ground to make up, so he's got to move 3 zones and end up in the top zone with the new spawn point. And he's also got to try and skip past Deadpool. Deadpool's body is looking a little worse for wear, but it's still got some life in it. I roll another 5-6, so he's got a big hole in him, he's missing his head, he's missing his sword, but he's still got his gun. He shoots Wolverine on the way out. Wade, you jerk. Now again, this would be a terrible place for me to leave a character in normal circumstances, all alone and on a spawn point, but I have something special in mind. Wait for it because it's going to come up. Zombie turn, again, there are no zombies on the board. The bystanders get to activate, so Shauna activates and moves into the zone with Rogue and Cyclops. It's time for the spawn phase, and for the lower zone we get Brute Rush. So, 2 brutes appear and immediately activate. Or they would normally, This would be bad news for Wolverine. I don't really want to get stuck in the hallway with a bunch of brutes. So he is going to spend a power and use Amanda Sefton's special ability. Apparently hanging out with Nightcrawler all that time really taught her to appreciate teleportation spells. So, Amanda's special ability is if enemies spawn within range 1 before any rush, and that's cool because these guys are about to rush, I can spend 1 power to move 1 zone, ignoring any enemies. So, poof! Amanda magics Wolverine and herself out of the corridor and into the zone with Shauna, Cyclops, and Rogue. Nicely done. These bystanders are super handy. I mean, I'd be trying to rescue them anyway, but they're making life a lot easier. Especially since the second spawn is another group of 2 brutes. That would have been a lot of brutes to have to deal with. I'm glad Wolverine's out of there. So round 4 and back to the heroes. I see no reason to stop activating Rogue first. She rescues Shauna, moves to the right, and then gets into the X-Jet. Colossus is next, taking Abigail with him. Wolverine and Amanda Sefton move to the right and leave as well. And that leaves fearless leader Cyclops. Not wanting to leave too many brutes wandering the halls of the X-Mansion, he powers up. He was at 3 power already, so he only gains 1. I know under normal circumstances you'd be better off just doing 2 attacks instead of a power-up and an attack in a situation like this, but these brutes have 2 health each, so I really hate to throw my dice and have to waste a hit, so I just want to do 1 big hit. Anyway, he powers up, gets himself to 4 power, does an optic blast into the zone with the brutes, using all 4 of that power for a total of 6 dice, and they all hit. Wouldn't ya know it? 3 dead brutes. Great job, Cyclops. You can move over to the right for your last action and hop in for a free action at the end, meaning that we've won. The objectives were to get the green objective in the lower left and have everyone exit the board in the top right. Nice easy game to start us off with, and yet we still took some wounds from dumb zombie Deadpool. Wouldn't be surprised if that guy shows up again. Did a couple things inefficiently. Gotta remember that Rogue opening doors is a free action. But can't complain too much. That's a nice full X-Jet full of survivors. On to the next mission. So again, sorry about my voice. Leave a comment below if you have any questions, observations, or concerns, and I will see you on the next one.